It's the end of the decade, and Metacritic just released their top 50 games.
And now we're going to tell you why Metacritic sucks.
Hot take.
Game review scores don't matter.
So Metacritic has finally released their top 50 games of the last decade. Now, for those who don't know, Metacritic has two scoring systems. We've got one that's an aggregation of all of the scores across media outlets, and then there's the user score, which, love it, like it, hate it, whatever, it's usually a 0 or a 10 because people like to express what they feel about the game. So this list only looks at the aggregate of the media outlets, and we're gonna go through all 50. We're not gonna name them all, but we're gonna share our thoughts about, oh yeah, that definitely belongs on there. That's kind of weird order. Personally, I'm surprised to see that Super Mario Galaxy 2 is at the top of the list.
Yeah.
For the decade, that's crazy.
But like, that's just the thing, right? The list is looking at all of these different reviewers, and a lot of people really like that game. But at the same time, the list has a lot of names on there that don't make sense in the placement that they're on. A lot of people talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 as a really fun game, and a lot more people talk about it being an incredibly boring game. But most people out there recommend the first game over the second one. However, on this list, Red Dead Redemption 2 appears above Red Dead Redemption 1, which in my opinion is a little bit weird. I don't think it should have happened that way.
Well, the whole thing is weird. If you really want to open it up to the conversation about reviews, when you look at this list, the top scoring game is a 97, and then the 50th, we're already in the 91 range. But then you can discuss, like, no, but you never really see games score under 5.
Yeah.
So people are always talking about games usually between 5 to 10, and anything below 5, nobody even bothers to take a look at, because that's pretty much the range that people take a look at. So that's one issue with the review scores that we're seeing. Another is, do these review scores actually give any kind of indication of if this is good? Are we looking at, the cream of the crop here? Another one that you pointed out off camera was Death Stranding. That's another one where you say, well, the review score is one thing, but does that really convey anything to the user?
Yeah, I really don't think it does. See, with Death Stranding, the game as it existed when people reviewed it was a little bit different than what actually came out. So when a game originally releases, like let's say No Man's Sky, a game that people like now, when it originally came out, it was a bad game and all the reviews reflected that. So does the actual user score reflect the game better than the one that all the reviewers did initially? It doesn't work because this is an antiquated old system, as is the system of using numbers to review games, which is stupid. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, but let's talk about this list a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing that I find interesting is I'm really into sales numbers. Sure. And it's interesting because this list doesn't, Mario Galaxy 2 is not the game that sold the most copies of all time. Yeah. So it's interesting to see, we do see Grand Theft Auto 5 as the 4th on this list. That's a game clearly belongs there. We saw it had lost sales. What else we got? We got Mario Odyssey on here, Mass Effect 2. Oh, this one is a strange one. We saw there's a Pac-Man game, Pac-Man Championship Edition DX, which that caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting to see a Pac-Man game in the top 50 of the decade.
I know it's a game a lot of people really liked. I think it's one of the best Pac-Man games ever released. But how about Last of Us and Last of Us Remastered being side by side each other? How does that work? It's the same game, folks. One is just better resolution and a better frame rate. If anything, Last of Us Remastered should be above Last of Us, but it's not. Last of Us is above Last of Us Remastered. How does that work? It's the better version of Last of Us. I mean, did anyone not look at that list and go, that's a little weird?
It's because PlayStation 3 comes before, like, the numbering system, so it ranks higher. Oh. But yeah, we're talking 8th and 9th place are given to basically the same game, but just because it came out on different platforms, it holds different spots.
It's such a bizarre thing. There's also concepts about which versions of the games are they actually talking about. Some are PC, some are PS3. For instance, if we're going to talk about Portal 2, Portal 2 on here, I believe, was the Xbox 360 release.
Yeah, the Xbox 360 is the one that's listed as the 11th one on the top 50 list.
Why? The Xbox 360 version is likely the worst one that had come out, not by huge metrics. It's just the PlayStation 3 release and the PC version had a far better online community. It was free to play those games online, and you could play the PlayStation 3 version with someone, a co-op, on the PC. The 360 was left out alone. If anything, it's a worse version because you had to pay to play co-op. Did they not? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is bizarre to me. Like, how did that actually happen?
Well, I know as part of the Metacritic system, the review outlets have to indicate which platform they played on. And that, some of these outlets are specific to one console, so that you're going to know what they're reviewing.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe the ones that are more general and that have access to all the platforms, like for multi-plat games, it's kind of a roll of the dice on what system that they're going to play on. But I don't know if it skews more towards one platform over another or over another. Yeah.
No, look, this gets really confusing. It's really messy, really quick, because when you start looking at this stuff, a lot of it doesn't make sense. But why does it not make sense? Look, personal opinion aside, I have a very different opinion about video games than other people. There's some people out there that legitimately like Death Stranding, while other people did not. The thing is, you can like something or dislike something, but the moment you put a number to it, that's when things get really confusing. So, for instance, one outlet might have been looking at a game the way I would look at it. So, for instance, when I go to play a video game for me is 90% gameplay. I know that sounds crazy, but a game is a game. And if a game isn't a very good game, then it doesn't really work for me. It can have bad graphics, it can have bad music, it can have a bad story. But if the gameplay is solid, then everything else can kind of be looked past a little.
There are more forgiving areas of a game. And you're actually reminding me of the old game per review system that I think was either 4 or 5 different categories. And instead of having one universal score to say this game is a 91 or a 95, they would say the story is a 5 out of 5, the gameplay is a 2 out of 5.
Sure.
And then I feel that gives you a much better indication. So if you're looking at an RPG and the story's 5 out of 5 and gameplay is like 2, that's a very different conversation than if an action game has a 5 out of 5 story and a 2 out of 5 gameplay or whatever.
But you don't know what reviewers are doing. For instance, some of the outlets here might have been saying, okay, for me, graphics matter more than anything else. So this game is 90% graphics and 5% or 5% solitaire. Like, you know what I mean? The concept here is that the numbers don't reflect anything consistent amongst the publishers or the reviewers themselves, which also means that all these numbers don't actually reflect anything other than it being a number, really.
Yeah, and also across genre. You're talking about a number that means the same thing across genre, which is another very different thing.
That's true.
And this is the really bad part, is the fact that that number carries a lot of real weight outside of just the consumer understanding of the value of the game.
True,
because I don't know if they're still doing this, but at one time, developers and publishers were assigning pay bonuses to developers based on the Metacritic score. So if that game scored bad for whatever reason, it was the employees that suffered. They didn't get a bonus that year, or they got pay cuts, or they got fired. I don't know to what extreme it went.
One of the most notorious examples of this is a rumored involvement with Obsidian working with Bethesda, where when they created Fallout New Vegas, which most people believe and communally agree to be the best Fallout-style game of the recent generation of those releases, that game did bad enough on Metacritic that they ended up basically creating this, not giving them their bonus or the pay that they really required for it, which hurt Obsidian. So that sucks, but that's the kind of stuff that these numbers do. They don't logically make sense. Now, another problem that you have with these numbers is that when you hear a number like 55 or 50 or 45 or whatever, you would assume that 50 and below means it's a bad game, or 50 and above means it's somewhat of a good game. When in reality, what the basic number is that we're looking at is mostly 65 and above means it's good. But there's a weird, that means like everything below 50 is just even worse than worse.
It means it shouldn't even exist. Shouldn't take up shelf space or anything. It shouldn't even be considered.
I just hate that. The numbers need to mean something, right? Yeah. And then if you really think about how reviewers are looking at this, Metacritic doesn't go around and look at every reviewer and go, how versed are you with video games? You could just go out, one publisher, let's say a publisher on like IGN, could get a reviewer that possibly doesn't know what he's doing. Or it doesn't mean that this happens all the time. I'm only using IGN as an example here, but maybe that reviewer has never played a first-person shooter before. So when they go to review that first-person shooter, they actually don't know anything about first-person shooters, and they can't comprehend the mechanics, and to be able to basically review that is almost an impossibility to them.
That's a very good point, because I have insights into how Metacritic actually, I worked over on the media side, and there is no safeguard against that. So literally, you could have someone who's never played a first-person shooter review a first-person shooter game, And that goes into this. That goes into this aggregation. Now, the wishful thinking is that because it's aggregated over multiple outlets, situations like that kind of get phased out.
Sure.
But who knows? It is a risk.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not to say that someone that's never played a first-person shooter shouldn't be able to look at this first-person shooter and give their opinion. I think it's important. The problem is, if you're reviewing sandwiches, if you've never had a sandwich before, how did you know you had a bad sandwich?
How did you know if it was a sandwich? Well, if it was a
Yeah.
hot dog? Is that a sandwich or is that...
Exactly. What if somebody gave you a bowl of soup and said, this is a sandwich, and then you reviewed that sandwich, which was soup, and then everyone thought you were insane? That's the problem. You need to have some basis of understanding. Like when you go to review movies, typically one of the requirements is for a lot of reviewers out there is that you have watched movies, like a lot of them, to understand what it is.
Or studied movies to understand the core. Anyways, we're getting off track. But other things that is interesting, because this is spanning a decade, it's interesting because I completely forgot about this genre. But remember at the beginning of the decade is when we were at the prime of the rock band genre and Guitar Hero. So we got Rock Band 3 at 25th spot. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God. I remember when that was so crazy. Like that was flying off shelves. And now you go everywhere in like thrift stores. There's just plastic guitars everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, there's a way if you look at the list they gave where you can basically go, okay, these games aren't relevant anymore. They don't make a lot of sense. But that's not really what it is. What you're actually looking at here is the time capsule of when that game was reviewed. Right. It doesn't continue. Like we mentioned with No Man's Sky, the reviews didn't continue after the initial reviews were set. Big publishing companies like that are doing reviews aren't going back to those old games and adjusting things. Some do, to be fair. Some have this review is in a constant state of a look.
The site does. Metacritic does not. That's their policy. Once they have a review score, it does not change. So if any outlet says this game is a 7 out of 10, and then a few years later it gets patched and updated, and it's like, oh, this is a 9 out of 10, Metacritic will not reflect that.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? DLC. Expansion packs, things that can drastically alter a game and make them even better, or in some cases worse, depending on what it is. That means that if we were to have reviewed Tetris 99 on day one, we would only be looking at a game that had one song, one skin, and 99 players, and it didn't always work 100% all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we also saw that on Splatoon. Splatoon is a perfect example that when it was released, it got low scores. 7.5, because a lot of people were saying it's a good game, there's not a lot here. They kept updating that game for over a year, and a lot of people did a second take and they said this is now an 8 or 9 out of 10 game. Again, the current industry standard, because Metacritic is still referred to as the industry standard, does not account for any of that. There's a lot of shortcomings, and it's a bit of an outdated model that was built, I don't know when, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
Quite a while ago. So we need a new system, I think.
Yeah. So what are we telling you? Well, we're telling you that you might see lists like this from a company like this website or whatever, but don't take them seriously. In fact, don't even go to Metacritic and use that as a metric for anything, because they literally mean nothing. A game that came out initially that was good may be updated or patched to be worse over time. If you played Team Fortress 2 originally, that game was fantastic, but then it became about hats. And
you're not going to find those sorts of games on here.
No. So
on this list,
like this is the problem, folks. These lists can alter the perception of the industry over what is valuable and what is not, and it can also drive a lot of companies out there to make a game that starts off good but make it worse by adding a bunch of micro content over top or payable DLC over top that is required to enjoy the aspect of the entire video game. Games can be curved in such a way where a reviewer gets a copy where it doesn't actually reflect the exact copy that consumers are going to get. And that's the kind of place that we're in. I've seen tons of video games, either pre-release or post-release, that have been good, been interesting, and then when I went to go actually play the one that came out, it ended up being a completely different experience with poor performance and graphics and just everything was wrong.
Well, another game I just noticed, the 40th one on this list, is Journey, a game that was praised when it came out. It's scoring a 92 on here. I played it last year, and I can tell you it was a very different game. It was an empty world, and I was like, there was one other dude in there, and I was like, is that I guess I would be spoiling a bit. I don't know, but I think when people were playing that at launch, it was a full world because
there's a whole bunch of people playing.
Yeah, you're playing with a whole bunch of players. So this whole time I was like, is that AI? Like there was only one other guy, and it's only at the end that I realized, when you see the names, and I was like, oh, that was another player.
Yeah.
But it was a really different experience than people who played it in the first couple of years at launch. So that's an example of a game that just did not hold up well, in my opinion.
I agree, folks. I mean, this whole concept of looking at these games and thinking that Metacritic offers something to you that can give you kind of an insight to what the game is, it doesn't even work. It doesn't age well. The only time that it kind of works sometimes is in the user reviews, but the user reviews, a lot of people don't actually have to have played the game to review it, so they can say whatever they want, and that's a bad thing. All it takes is just for someone to say this sucks now because of this update, or our creator said something I didn't like, whatever it is, and the review scores completely get changed, and it has nothing to do with the game. So we're saying don't pay attention to it, but what about you? Do you still want to use a site like Metacritic to kind of gauge the quality of a game, or would you prefer to use a completely different metric?
Or do you have new ideas of what a new system could use to improve? Let us know.